Tonight, the Indian Parliament's counter-resolution strongly rejecting the one passed by Pakistan's National Assembly yesterday, which had blamed India for aggression along the line of control. The Indian resolution today also hit back on Jammu and Kashmir, reiterating that it's an integral part of India. Ending their bitter differences over foreign policy, India's political parties came together today to respond, saying India was not a threat to Pakistan, but that terror groups in Pakistan were a threat to peace in the region. The war of words coming at a time when ceasefire violations along the line of control have gone up.
This House rejects and deplores the resolutions passed by the National Assembly of Pakistan on August 13, 2013 and the Provincial Assembly of Punjab, which make absolutely baseless and unfounded allegations against the Indian Army and the people of India. There should be absolutely no doubt in anyone's mind, including members of the Pakistan National Assembly, that it was the Pakistan Army that was involved in the unprovoked attack on an Indian Army patrol and will always...
India's Parliament finally coming together on Pakistan and passing a strongly worded resolution. The tit-for-tat action came 24 hours after a resolution passed in Pakistan's National Assembly, which blamed India's army for unprovoked aggression. Parliament also hit back at Islamabad's mention of Kashmir.
The entire state of Jammu and Kashmir, including the territory forcibly and illegally occupied by Pakistan, is an integral part of India and will always remain so.
While the resolution has been tough, there are voices calling for restraint.
We have to think of avenues of friendship, because that is the only way forward. We talked even when Atal Bihari Ji went across the border and they killed 22 of my people in Rajouri. We still talked.
In Islamabad, Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif said he would try to ease tensions with India after talks with the UN Secretary General. But he also raked up Kashmir, saying, "We hope that the UN will play its due role in resolving the Kashmir dispute." While Islamabad continued to deny any involvement of its army in the killing of 5 Indian soldiers.
पाकिस्तान में किसी के लिए भी कहना बड़ा मुश्किल है कि ये वाकया कैसे पेश आया है। हमें इस बात का पूरा यकीन है कि इसमें पाकिस्तान आर्मी की किसी किस्म की कोई इन्वॉल्वमेंट नहीं है।
The political and diplomatic freeze comes at a time when the ceasefire along the line of control faces a serious threat after 10 years. In the last 1 week alone, there have been 8 ceasefire violations. India has made it clear talks are possible only in an environment free from violence and terror. In New Delhi with Sandeep Pukan, Nidhi Razdan for NDTV. Well, Nawaz Sharif also sent an Independence Day greeting to Prime Minister Manmohan Singh today, saying it's in our common interest to work closely to achieve our shared goals of peace and prosperity in the region. I look forward to our meeting in New York to discuss issues of mutual interest. It's our desire, he said, to turn a fresh page in our bilateral relations. Remember, that meeting in New York hasn't been confirmed, at least on record, by the Indian side. But the Indian Prime Minister, we are told from sources in the government, also did send a message, an annual message, as he does on the 14th of August on Pakistan's Independence Day, where he said that India was committed to pursuing peace and cooperation between the two countries. The interesting thing is that this time this message was not officially released by the government of India. It, we are told, was sent to Pakistan yesterday before the Parliament resolution that was passed today, but is a complete contrast in a sense if you look at the tone and tenor to what Parliament passed and what the Prime Minister has said. The question though tonight is whether the ceasefire on the line of control is now in serious danger, whether this peace process is really in danger of unraveling, or whether it is rhetoric on both sides because of domestic opinion on both sides. That's what we're going to look at tonight. Joining us this evening is Dr. Radha Kumar. She was a former interlocutor for Jammu and Kashmir. Also joining us, Jay Panda, Lok Sabha MP of the BJD, who's written this week on why it is important to continue to engage in a dialogue with Pakistan. Sudhanshu Trivedi, the national spokesperson of the BJP, is also with us. We'll be joined by more panelists shortly. Radha Kumar, let's look at this Indian parliamentary resolution. Was it the right thing to do? Does it seem too much of tit for tat? Or was it important for the Indian Parliament also to be seen to be uniting politically and sending out a strong message back? After all, their National Assembly did it, and we've seen so fragmented and divided on this side.
I think it's a bit childish. Resolutions are childish, in my opinion, especially when they deal with hostile bilateral relations. You don't, as a parliamentarian, want to add hostility for the sake of hostility. And speech is not a substitute for action. What I do find very disappointing in all of this is that we've seen Parliament in chaos over these killings. We've seen parties talking about a meeting in September between the two Prime Ministers and whether it should happen or should not happen. Now, September, that's a month away. You've just had the death of soldiers on the LOC. Why are you not picking up the phone to talk to each other to say this has to stop, we have to identify how did this happen and ensure that it doesn't happen again?
So you're saying the opposite, that they need to actually engage much more now?
Yes, not only do they need to talk, they need to talk in real time. And they need to talk to each other, not at each other, which is what these parliamentary resolutions are. It was very silly of the Pakistani Assembly to pass such a resolution, and it was equally silly of ours to respond.
Let me ask then the Member of Parliament on the panel tonight, Jai Panda, how would you respond to what Radha says, that resolutions like this don't help, they are childish, and in fact you should have the leaderships on both sides on the phone with each other trying to diffuse tensions rather than increasing them?
Well, there are two separate issues. I think it is illogical to expect that Parliament will not be in sync with the public mood. And there is real anger and there is a real sense of betrayal in India today, with again an increase in cross-border infiltration and attacks, because there have been several promises from different dispensations in Pakistan that its territory would not be allowed to be used for terrorism, and particularly against India. So we must recognize that. But we must also recognize that Pakistan is not just a normal country. Besides the fact that it's a nuclear country and it's our neighbor, we can't, it's in our neighborhood, we can't walk away from the neighborhood, we have to live with it and we have to learn to deal with it. It has a special situation where the elected civilian government does not have the kind of full authority that we are used to from our civilian government. They have something called a deep state that sort of runs, that has enormous influence behind the scenes. And we must recognize that Pakistan has different stakeholders, some of whom are very antipathic to us, but some of whom have seen the writing on the wall. They themselves are in a very bad situation internally with a great deal of violence, which they have nurtured themselves over the years. And I think there is a significant movement within Pakistan to have normal relations with India. So what I have written is...
Yeah, I'm going to come to that, because I just want to touch on the issue of the resolutions first and come to the complexities in Pakistan as well. You believe that it was important for Parliament to reflect the anger that is being felt in the country today over these killings. Abhishek Singhvi of the Congress Party joins us now. Dr. Singhvi, Radha Kumar says these are childish resolutions, they don't help. Jai Panda says that it was important to reflect the mood of the people. But the Pakistani Parliament or the National Assembly, they're united pretty quickly around the government and passed their resolution. We seem to have done it as an afterthought, as a retaliatory measure after being so deeply divided and so bitterly divided between the Congress and the opposition over the last week, over these killings.
Nidhi, I think we should be proud partly because that is what differentiates a democracy. That cacophony which you frequently mistake for disunity is the essence of democracy. But equally, on core issues we are united, and therefore I fully endorse and agree that while on the ground concretely such resolutions may not immediately transform into concrete results, they are nevertheless vital. When Parliament passes them, when MPs debate them, when we in civil society go around them and discuss them, we are making a very striking point. And that's the best way for this democracy to work. We may not have a uniformity of views nor the speed, because both democracy tax and democracy price has to be factored in for the speed. And I think it's not a very great issue about the speed. I think what's more important is that people see it as the united voice of a true, mature, deep democracy, which certainly Pakistan cannot claim to be. And I think it has its symbolic and its actual value.
that in his Independence Day message to Nawaz Sharif, we are told that the Prime Minister said that he is committed to pursuing peace and cooperation between India and Pakistan. Now, I know this message was sent yesterday, but it seems to be at variance with the rather tough stand adopted in Parliament today, Dr. Singhvi.
Not at all. Not at all.
Why?
Just imagine how it would sound if I was to write to you on your Independence Day saying that we are committed to war and friction between us.
No, you could just
or
say
that
Happy
we are not
Independence
committed
Day.
to peace and no. We are committed. That's the strength of a democracy, and we should remain committed. But when we are committed, we always hope for the best, but we are prepared for the worst. And beyond a point, we lose absolutely nothing by maintaining that commitment, and also not at all lowering our guard. Not a single bad intention or poor action of Pakistan can or will go unreplied. But equally, we gain stature in the world, we don't lose anything, and we should always have the doors open. But that does not mean that we will not and have not already taken action where it pinches, it hurts Pakistan. Everything can't be publicized, everything can't be discussed in television channels, but certainly India knows how to put its point of view across, and I think this combination is the best.
Okay,
We
Sudhanshu
don't have to
Trivedi,
be
is that the best
petty about
combination?
Independence Day messages.
So is the BJP satisfied with that, Mr. Trivedi, that you need to keep a door open, or do you think it sends out confusing signals about where the government stands, or are they being mature and pragmatic about this?
I do agree with Dr. Singhvi on these two aspects. Number one, we are a democracy, so we can reach conclusion after a little bit of discussion. Second thing, we are a mature country, mature democracy, so we must always have an option for dialogue. But in the present circumstances, there is a limit to it. Since last 8 or 9 years, the consistent policy of Pakistan, betraying each and every commitment what they have given. I would like to remind, in 2004, General Musharraf has given a commitment to India that they will not allow their soil to perpetrate terror against India. Then still 26/11 has happened, and afterwards whatever happened in the recent months, whatever has happened. In this situation, I don't think that the scope of dialogue will solve any purpose, rather than, if looking at this situation and the consistent policy of Pakistan of 2 or 3 decades for engineering terror in India, it will be childish that if we only rely on just the resolutions and just the statements. We must need some strong diplomatic messages, whether we should stop the talks or we should recall their ambassadors, or some other things, like during the NDA regime we have blockaded the air blockade and air traffic block. Some sort of thing has to be done, so that a strong message should go to Pakistan that whatever is going.
Dr. Singhvi wants to quickly respond to you, and then I'd like to go across to our guest in Pakistan. Yes.
Just half a minute. Please do not think that a resolution in Parliament is mutually exclusive to everything else. This is only one very small part. It's a symbolic gesture, but a united voice of our Parliament. It is not a substitute for hard action on the ground. That's point one. Point two, I don't want to sound divisive at all today, but I must say that no democracy, when you are in power and running the democracy, should behave in a sulking manner. We should take stern action, and I am confident the government will take stern action for the recent events, including the skirmishes at the border. That is completely unforgivable on Pakistan's part. But let me remind my good friend Mr. Trivedi that when Mr. Vajpayee went with the bus yatra, he had Kargil. I don't blame him thereafter for having Agra subsequently. And after Agra he had Parliament attack. And therefore he had to keep the door open, he had no option. Therefore democracies must talk, but that doesn't mean that we agree to an unequal bargain. And India knows very well how to deal with Pakistan, let me tell you. And we also know how to hurt them where it hurts.
Radha Kumar first wanted to make a comment on what you just said. You always need to keep the door open, and perhaps many would say that that's a fact. The BJP has done it in some of the most difficult times, as Abhishek Singhvi was pointing out. We've kept the door open.
There is a fundamental problem sometimes with the perception of dialogue. We seem to often think that dialogue is only about nice things. But actually the most important element of talks is always how to solve the most difficult, most conflict-ridden issues. The reason you go to dialogue is that you say that we feel that war may not be a solution, therefore we have to find a way through a combination of dialogue and other diplomatic mechanisms, leverage, pressure, if necessary the very strong actions of sanctions and blockades. You have a whole gamut of these things at your command, but the important thing is that all these different measures need to be taken as part of a coordinated policy which combines short-term and medium-term and long-term.
Are you saying we're confused right now about how...
I think we've always had a problem in being able to maintain a policy. No, we are very consistent.
Consistently
we are
bad.
very consistent, but we are not able to build from one action to the next action, and that maybe the media or others are right in saying that we spend too much time in debating matters like whether the Prime Minister should meet in September, which I again want to stress is a good many weeks away.
And
we don't want to wait for
earlier.
that. We need to talk about this problem now, and we need to figure out a way to resolve it. You need the militaries, you need the cross-border commanders, all these hotlines and this and that you set up. Here's a crisis, why are they not in operation?
Let me just go across to Saeed Tariq Pirzada, who's a strategic affairs expert joining us tonight from Islamabad. Mr. Pirzada, I want to understand what is the message that the Pakistani government and the parliament there was trying to give us yesterday through this resolution, because on one hand, you know, we keep being told that, and we see from Mr. Nawaz Sharif's statement that he keeps talking about being committed to a peace process with India. He's talked about easing tensions with India once again today after a meeting with the UN Secretary General, yet it was a minister in his government who moved this resolution in the National Assembly yesterday, which said among other things that it was unprovoked aggression by Indian military forces. It also said something that never happened, that the Pakistani High Commission in Delhi was attacked. It just never happened, sir. So what was the message that the civilian government of Pakistan was giving us through this resolution yesterday?
Well, first of all, you need to go back to the statement of your defense minister once you started accusing Pakistan of killing 5 Indian soldiers. He said very clearly, we all heard, it's on record, that yes, the people who killed the 5 Indian soldiers, they were in the uniform of Pakistan Army, but he never said these were folks of the Pakistani Army who did it. The next day, the guy was grilled in your media and by your country, fellow countrymen who are in power, and he was forced to change his position. So this is the starting point. But I would not get into any difficult conversation. The issue is that the Prime Minister of Pakistan made it very clear, not only in his meeting with the United Nations Secretary General, but also otherwise, that look, we want peace dialogue with Pakistan. He said that before he became the Prime Minister, he said it after he was elected, and now he is running the show. He said it today. So if you just want to trust him, I think that'll be a good start. Let me say one thing.
But I'm asking you about the resolution, sir, because there were three. Apart from the 2 points I mentioned, there was also that you will extend diplomatic, political, and moral support to the legitimate struggle of Kashmiris. That, of course, drew a counter reaction here. My point is, sir, you're right. Mr. Nawaz Sharif, even before he became Prime Minister, has been sending these messages of peace. But it is a minister from his own government that moved this resolution. I'm saying, putting the military aside for a moment, what is the message then that the National Assembly of Pakistan is sending India today, or has this happened under military pressure?
Well, when the line of control has constant firing, violations of international law, killing of Pakistani soldiers, or the lives of the Pakistani citizens being hurt, then the Pakistani Parliament also represents the will of the people, and they are sovereign and they are very independent in expressing their will. So don't be offended by that. We have seen Indian Parliament passing many resolutions in the past. So these issues should not be. The issue is what the governments are saying. I would say, if you listen carefully to Salman Khurshid, if you listen carefully to the people, the Prime Minister of Pakistan, they are talking about peace. Let them talk. Do not tell them not to meet in September. Do not tell them delay the process. Look, the outstanding issues, as the Prime Minister of Pakistan said, or Kashmir and many other issues. So if we don't do that, the conflict will linger on, and it will not be in the interest of India and Pakistan. This is the message that the Prime Minister of Pakistan wanted to send.
Okay, Jay Panda, I'm coming back to you because you were talking about the deep state, as we were mentioning, that the unique position that Pakistan is in. How then do you understand this assembly resolution that came from their side?
I think,
let's not get...
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, this is to Jay Panda here in Delhi. Yes, Jay.
Let's not get too caught up on the parliament resolutions in both countries. Both parliaments, I think, have to reflect the national political mood. I was talking a little bit earlier about the core issue, and the core issue is that we must recognize that Pakistan's civilian elected government is not the ultimate power. Their armed forces have a very special and privileged position, which is difficult for us to understand in India. But we must recognize that in Pakistan, there are several Pakistans. There are different stakeholders that influence policy making in Pakistan. Now, when I said that we must have a dialogue with their civilian government, I don't mean to say that we should just keel over and play dead. By having a dialogue with their civilian government, I'm not precluding any of the options that we have on the LOC through our military, either overt or covert operations. All I'm saying is that we can't just do katti and not have a dialogue. We can assert ourselves, we can assert Indian national interest both on the LOC through covert and overt actions, but we must have a dialogue with them.
I want to take that to the BJP because actually, Jay, what you wrote...
Could I address that question?
Okay, sure, Mr. Pirzada, go ahead.
Well, when he said we have many options, including overt and covert, options on the line of control, he is talking about going across the border into Pakistan and launching raids or other actions. Number two, he said we have covert. That means using RAW and other intelligence agencies, using them in Balochistan, in the tribal areas, and putting pressure on Pakistan.
On, Mr. Pirzada.
And I'm just explaining what your fellow said.
You know that there are things the militaries will do on the line of control. There are options the militaries will exercise on the line of control. I mean, we could go into an endless debate here on the Lashkar-e-Taiba and what it does and how it's supported and funded. So, we'll get into an endless argument on that.
You can talk about that. That's not a problem.
Sure, we'll be here all night.
Definitely talk.
We'll be here all night. Let's try to be a little constructive. Let's try to look ahead and see. I want to ask Sudhanshu Trivedi of the BJP that actually what Jay Panda wrote in his article. It was a very interesting line. Engage with those who want peace in Pakistan so as not to cede room to those who don't. Sudhanshu Trivedi, does the BJP understand the complexities that Pakistan finds itself in and the need that India has therefore to engage, as Jay Panda says, with those who want peace?
Yes, we very well understand the complexity of the Pakistan. What Mr. Pirzada was saying, that Defence Minister of India was forced to change his statement. Yes, of course he was forced, but he was forced by the democratic instruments like media and the opposition and other public voices. But what has prompted to change the stand of Pakistan's government, it is quite obvious. This obvious factor gives us a clear message what the Pakistanis, as Mr. Jay Panda was saying, that there are several Pakistans. We cannot forget the thing that in 1999 during our government, when Prime Minister Vajpayee was taking the Lahore bus, at the same time the Kargil operation had started and the civilian government was not having any clue of that. So that's why there are several dimensions in Pakistan and they should be dealt with dialogue, with diplomacy and if required certain sort of actions.
I want to take that same question to Abhishek Singhvi because Abhishek Singhvi, the criticism of the government is that we seem to be confused on how to deal with Pakistan. Many would say it reflects even in the Prime Minister's, greeting on Independence Day. We are determined to have peace with them. We lay down certain, red lines about terror, 26/11. Then we seem to go out of our way and cross those red lines. Is that the problem? Is it inconsistent? Does it need to be consistent that no, we're not going to let the bad guys win this across the border?
You see, Nidhi, both criticisms can't be right. Just now you heard another panelist accusing people of being too consistent and too little creativity. The point is, foreign policy is something of a bedrock and a fundamental principle upon which nations are largely consistent. So there is a very high degree of consistency in foreign policy compared to economic policy, domestic policy, tariff policy, etc. That's point one. Point two, however, foreign policy, unlike other areas, doesn't produce immediate results. It doesn't even produce short-term results. These are long, intractable, several decades old problems. Now just consider, after 26/11, if you look carefully, I don't personally believe that Pakistan has ever before suffered so much international opprobrium, international calumny, isolation, which by itself in international law and foreign affairs is a very major thing. It sounds very intangible in in the domestic context, but it's a very major thing. Secondly, it has been forced, although far too little, too late, too slowly, I agree with all that, but it has been forced to take some steps to suggest that they will bring to justice those on 26/11. They've at least owned up to the nationalities of some of them. They are trying to go through commissions. Now it is absolutely not adequate, it is slow, it is not what we want, but what more can you do short of declaring war? So where is the inconsistency?
But the point is that
the inconsistency is not
are you going to keep putting the dialogue into a deep freeze
that we will
at every hurdle?
No, there are moments when we have given them very stern messages. There are moments when we stop dialogue. But in the ultimate analysis, you tell me a simple question. You go and sit in a corner and never again talk to Pakistan unless I say, Pakistan, you do 1, 2, 3. Now then you leave the timeline to Pakistan. You leave it to decide when it will do 1, 2, 3. You don't engage at all. And then you might end up eating more humble pie when you are forced to engage without your preconditions being met. That's not the way international affairs work. It requires a certain maturity while keeping your guard up. And let me tell you, there are far more covert, non-military covert also, economic, social, diplomatic and other means by which you can not only put pressure but hurt Pakistan, pinch Pakistan where it hurts. And that is well known to international diplomacy, and that is done. And India rightfully does that as well. So don't think it's a no pain, no loss game. But there are degrees of, escalation. Yes, certain things will justify an armed intrusion. Will justify an armed intrusion, but not everything.
Address some of these questions that have been raised. Number one, somehow some of the analysts in this show are giving the impression as though India is in a position to dictate Pakistan, punish Pakistan through military or economic means or several other means. Let me remind you that after the nuclear technology agreement of India with the United States, people were celebrating in the streets in different parts of India, in the establishment of India, that look, we isolated Pakistan on this issue and that issue. You know what happened after the perseverance of Pakistan? Now we have concluded 2 major agreements yesterday with the Chinese. They'll be building and we'll be building 2 major 1,000 megawatt plants, nuclear energy plants in Pakistan.
And I can tell you the
that
nuclear deal was nothing about isolating Pakistan.
That is not an international agreement.
The nuclear deal was about India. It was a foreign policy achievement for India. It wasn't about isolating Pakistan. What are we talking about here?
Look, you're changing the issue. What the issue is, what I'm trying to say is that you put pressure on Pakistan to reach a settlement. You don't put pressure on Pakistan to block its road to progress. There is a difference.
But Mr. Pirzada, what does India do? I'll ask you this. Objectively, just for a sec.
Here are the suggestions. 1, 2, 3.
How do we deal with your army? See, I just want to ask you that, if you can give us an honest answer. How do we deal with your army? Because most people here don't believe that the army is serious about permanent peace with India. They've kind of allowed a certain amount of peace with India over the years for their own reasons, but they don't want permanent peace with India. This is the army's way of telling Nawaz Sharif who calls the shots. How do we deal with them?
Okay. And until 2 years ago, when the 14th of August was celebrated in Pakistan, the chiefs of staff of Pakistani army used to talk about a belligerent neighbor, a hostile neighbor, and all those things. But for the last 2 years, including yesterday's speech by General Kiani, the head of the Pakistani Armed Forces, Army, he made it very clear that we have to worry about terrorism, sectarian violence, unity within the state. He did not point out to India anything at all that India is the culprit. He simply said there are internal and external threats, but he focused his entire speech on the internal issues. So you guys don't get it. That's the problem. You always think this is the Pakistan army. I assure you one thing, without supporting it for any issue, that this is the Pakistan army that facilitated this transfer of civilian power from one democratic government to the second government.
So you're saying we don't get it?
Because General Kayani, no, you don't get it, because General Kayani said it very clearly in yesterday's speech that the credit goes to the people of Pakistan who went to the polls despite all the difficulties that we have in the country. So appreciate the role of Pakistani army instead of demonizing it.
Despite your passionate intervention,
No, that's not my that's my analysis.
Despite your passionate analysis, many people will not be convinced
This is not
about the army's
analysis.
intentions.
This is a realistic analysis.
Okay, he says it's realistic. Is it? The point is, even when you talk about, army commanders on both sides talking, isn't there just too much of a trust deficit on that front right now?
The trouble is that the longer you don't talk, the deeper we'll get the mistrust. The only way you repair a trust deficit is by endless engagement, and no one can put a timeline on that. Obviously it depends also on internal political will and other matters. But I'd like to just shift this discussion slightly. We began with a discussion of what's going on the LOC. We've seen the escalation of tensions on the LOC over the past months, actually, not just weeks. And we have agreed CBNs on handling these things. So my first question is, you need to sit down and really talk about how do you stop attempts at infiltration, escalations, misperceptions, this kind of conversation and cross-firing. This has to stop. We have to sit down and we have to now set guidelines on, first of all, implementing the CBNs. Why do you have a hotline if you don't pick it up?
And maintaining that ceasefire, that is important.
But this is the way you maintain the ceasefire. Second question on this. So that's one part of it. The other part of it is all the other issues that we have also not managed to agree, where we have made some progress and then halted. Those dialogues, what are we going to do about those? Mr. Singhvi referred to 2611. That whole set of issues, what progress are we going to get on that? These are the matters that we have to sit down and talk about now, and not stop talking about it, but keep up the pressure. And I would like Mr. Pirzada to tell me something about that, this new government. Can we expect them to progress on ensuring that the kind of thing that has happened at the LOC does not happen again, making sure that the CBNs that were instituted are kept going fast?
Let Mr. Pirzada answer the question and then go to Jay Panda. Yes,
the other issues. And Kashmir, only one point. We have the Simla agreement under which we agreed to talk bilaterally on this. Surely your government knows that for many political leaders in India, you're talking about dragging the UN in is a violation of the ceasefire agreement. Why would you do that? Especially when the UN has no interest in coming in.
Yes, Mr. Pirzada.
Okay, here is what it is. The issue is this, that the Nawaz Sharif government is committed to restoring normal ties with the Indian Republic, and if you look at his history, he has been at odds with domestic institutions on that very problem. The softest person in terms of dealing with India and reaching an agreement with India, in my personal judgment, is Mr. Nawaz Sharif. His policies since the days of Mr. Vajpayee have been a bare testimony to that. But if you think that it is the Pakistan army that is still on the pilot seat and Mr. Nawaz Sharif is not, you are not taking the dialogue process in the right direction in a constructive manner. So That is number one. So you have to deal with Nawaz Sharif. That's your best chance. If you don't, you might have a tough guy, a hawk, who might use the military language.
Well,
because
you
let
know,
me
it's
say
funny.
one thing.
It's funny because
let
in
me
this country,
just come to.
Mr. Pirzada,
No,
I'm
nothing is
almost
funny.
out of time. I
It's
have
a
only 30
serious talk.
seconds.
Nothing
in
is
this
funny.
country, we
It's a
actually
serious talk.
still, I think many people felt we had our best chance with General Musharraf, a military man, and
I will
there's
answer
a
you.
lot of
I will answer you on
romanticization
that.
of him here, which of course is not there in Pakistan. Jaypant, I want to give you the last word. How do you then deal with this deep state? How do you deal with the army? Are we not getting it, as Mr. Pirzada says? What do we do?
With regard to our friend from Pakistan with that very strong American accent, I agree with two things he said.
It has nothing to do with
I
the American
disagree with.
accent. This is plain analysis we are talking about.
I know. I agree with two things he said, and I disagree with one. I think he's right when he said that in the last couple of years, the Pakistani army's rhetoric against India has gone down. And I think also he's right that Nawaz Sharif has the credentials to make peace moves with India because of his track record from Atal Bihari Vajpayee's time. But I think he's wrong when he said that the Pakistani army has nothing to do when we have cross-border incidents and Indian soldiers are killed. Because even if it is not army regulars who do it, even if it is so-called non-state actors.
Statements.
Please, let me finish. Please let me finish. Please, you can't interrupt me. Please let me finish.
Go ahead, Jay, finish, yes.
So, the fact is the Pakistani army can crack down and stop the training camps of terrorist organizations across the LOC, and these can stop at any time. So the answer to your question, Nidhi, is that we must treat our response to the Pakistani civilian government differently from how we treat our response to the army. We must treat our response to the army with very cautious optimism, and we must use that old Reagan philosophy of trust but verify. And when it comes to the civilian government of Pakistan, I think we should.
But you're not United States. That's the problem.
All right.
You're not United States.
I'm out of time on this tonight, but it's an important issue and one we have to keep an eye on. This is a complicated relationship. We've seen a hardening of positions in recent days and weeks. The question is, with that meeting between the two prime ministers just 6 weeks away, how much is going to change between now and then? Many suspect a lot could change if no other major incident happens. Thank you very much to our panel for joining us on the program tonight. Happy Independence Day to all of you tomorrow. We'll see you on Friday.